All right, Coach Lee here. I'm a certified nutritionist and licensed cycling coach. We're going to talk about all things Zone 2 today. I've been making these videos for years and watching other people's videos for years, all about the physiology, why they're important, etc. But we never really talk about execution. Execute. So today what I want to do is we're going to talk about execution, and we're going to go through this long list of things of how you can have your best Zone 2 effort. But before we get into that, let's talk a little bit about physiology and all that great stuff. This chart, this is one of my favorite charts, physiological charts in human history. This was developed by Andy Coggan back in the early 2000s. He not only worked with athletes to develop this chart, but he just dove into the literature. So this chart is not just, 12 dudes in a lab. This is tens of thousands of athletes, all right? So you can actually read the article that this came from. This was the first official publication of power meter philosophy, if you will, by Andy Coggan back in 2003. The title, Expected Physiological Performance Adaptations Resulting from Training at Levels 1 through 7. And he goes through and he talks, here's, basically 7 levels in his system. And, he talks about where are the best bang for your buck for each of these major things. Increased plasma volume, mitochondria, lactate threshold, glycogen, the development of slow twitch muscles, muscle capillarization. And he goes through and he just makes this brilliant chart of where everything happens. And it's an amazing chart. One of the things about Zone 2 and why this is so important and why there's hundreds of videos on Zone 2. I've been making them since for years now. When I have athletes and I'm working with athletes, if I give them a Zone 3 tempo workout, I give them a threshold FTP workout, I give them a VO2 max efforts, they will nail those workouts without question. If I go do 8x3 at VO2, boom, yes sir, Coach Lee, I'm marching your army, I'm gonna rock this out. But if I give them the Zone 2 workout, that's the workout that an athlete is actually not going to do correctly. They might be in Zone 3, Zone 1, Zone 4, Zone 5. They might do everything but Zone 2 when I give them a Zone 2 workout. Usually is that they want to go too hard. This is crucial because if we look at accumulated time in zones for a year for a professional athlete, whether it's swimming, running, cycling, this is where that accumulated time actually adds up, where you try to stay out of Zone 1, active recovery, and you can look at this, and when one of my mentors years and years ago sent me this chart, right? So this is the accumulated time in zones, and we can see that about 65 to 70% of a professional athlete's time throughout the year will be in Zone 2. That's when I got it. So many athletes, when they come to me, they think that, no pain, no gain. And the goal of every cycling workout is to blow you up. In fact, that's not the case at all. Yeah, we are going to have times in the season where we dig and we make you sweat, we make you cry. But for a majority of the season, roughly 65 to 75% of that season, you are actually in Zone 2. And if you were to add up Zone 1, Zone 2, and Zone 3, that makes up probably about 90% of the accumulated time in zones for maximum benefit, for maximum development as a cyclist. We as cyclists and I as a coach really have to convey that message that to go faster, you have to go slower, right? You just can't go out there chasing 5 Strava segments for every workout every day and think that you're going to get better. No, we've got to recover, okay? So again, looking at this, we try to keep, these are often called junk miles here in Zone 1, so we try to push that over to Zone 2. Tempos, a very important zone. threshold. Like, all the zones are important, right? That's a key takeaway from Zone 2 talk, right? Anything, like, all the levels are important. They all have a function, but you have to really get your brain around the fact that for endurance sports, 80%, 80% of the time, 75% of the time, it's actually doing Zone 2 work. It's actually going slow. You're going slower so that you can get faster. And I've seen this 1,000 times. If you want your best VO2 max come this spring, do tons of foundation work, do tons of Zone 2 work, because you're developing all those tendons, you're developing that muscle glycogen, you're developing your mitochondria's ability to create ATP and, not only to bring the stuff in, create it, but also to push it out through exhaust, right? You're developing all those crucial physiological aspects that are necessary for the endurance world. Three big things of, there's so many ways that you can talk physiologically about Zone 2. I love biogenesis, efficiency, and oxygenation of the mitochondria. One of the biggest challenges and educational things that I've got to convey to an athlete is that, when you come to me, my primary concern is developing your ability to use energy. Let me repeat that again. When you come to me, my goal is to get you to bring in great energy, use great energy, and push it out the other side, if you will, right? Right? So many cyclists, when they come to me, they think that, cycling and all this is about big quads or something like that. Well, yeah, that plays a part of it. But in reality, it's your ability to metabolize energy. It's your ability to use gasoline. I, as a coach, primarily work with athletes in 3 ways during the foundation period. We talk about events and all that great stuff later on in the year. But right now, during a foundation period, one of the things I'm talking about are building your metabolic health, your metabolism, your cardiovascular systems, and then, those muscles, right? So those are primarily the 3 ways that I work with clients, and metabolism in workout and metabolic health out of your workout is crucial for me. So athletes that come to me, they get a 3-month metabolic plan where we look at the athlete's sleep. We look at how they breathe. We look at their food quality. We look at how much food they're bringing in. We look at hydration. Are they hydrated? We look at how they deal with chronic stress. We look at all these types of things to give them the metabolic health that they need to then develop fitness, right? Health comes before fitness, all right? So let's jump in here and let's just start nailing all this out. Oh, this 3. Biogenesis, efficiency, and oxidation. These have to do with mitochondria. So there's so many ways that we can think about the Zone 2, but for me, I'm really thinking about that diesel engine of the human body, or those millions of diesel engines that we call mitochondria. How can we get those fired up? So someone who has great metabolic health has good mitochondria. Mitochondria sits at the bottom of this metabolic health. So we think in terms of biogenesis during this Zone 2 work is creating more mitochondria. Then we think of efficiency. We want to make those mitochondria have an unbelievable efficiency at not only bringing in nutrients, but then processing those nutrients and then spitting them out the other side, exhaust, okay? And then the third is oxidation of fatty acid oxidation, or your fat metabolism, or the burning of fats. Fats are a huge fuel source for the human body, just because of the American lifestyle, how we live, how we eat. We have, as a species, we have primarily become a carb burning society. And so for me and my athletes, we want to tap into those 80,000 calories of fat fats that are in the human body, and we want to develop efficiency of really, when you go out and do an effort, you're burning fats and carbs primarily, unless you're just all out sprinting or something like that. So in that process, it's like, it could be like you're doing a zone 2 work. It's like 60% fats and 40% carbs. Well, we want to try to increase that as much as possible. We want 70% fats, 75% fats, and reduce your need for carbs and muscle glycogen throughout this process. Zone 2 work is great for that. It's great for developing your mitochondria. It's great for teaching the body fatty acid oxidation, all these things that we need. Now, we can talk about zone 2 in terms of muscle development, developing of tendons, developing of extra glycogen capacity in the muscles. We could talk about all of that, but for right now, I really think about mitochondrial health when it comes to zone 2. Now, let's execute. So use a power meter. So this is really important. So if you use a power meter, it changes the game. Okay. So if you're only going by heart rate, you could be doing an actual zone 3, but your heart rate is same, and then your heart rate is the same, and then it takes a while to catch up, and then it takes a while to come back down. So you actually could be all over the place. If you can just dial in your zone 2 work with that power meter, then you're going to be going a long way. Here's the screen that I love to use to train. This is my zone 2 screen. All I need is lap time, right? That's not average time. That's lap time. I hit that button, that lap button. It brings me up my lap time, my 3-second power, your heart rate, your cadence, and your average lap power. And so for me, that's all you need. Dialing in a great zone 2 effort is just watching that relationship between 3-second power and your average lap watts. And then it's just that interplay. And then you can just cruise along. For your zone 2 work, you can have a nice ceiling, say 200 watts, and a nice floor of 180 watts. And you can just cruise in there really nice and easy. All right, so power meter. Pace. This is a steady state effort. If you really want to develop those mitochondria, key to all of that is a steady state effort, right? So I'll have a lot of athletes, they'll go out and do a zone 2 effort that are new to me. And their average watts, if you look at the entire thing, the average watts are a zone 2. But then when I look in there, they have a huge variability index, meaning that they're doing 3, 4, they're doing 1, they're doing 4, 5, and 6, they're back to 1, right? That's no good. We want a steady state effort. Okay, we don't just want jerky movements. We don't want to be surgy out there. We want a steady state effort. And I'm telling you, if you get a great 2-hour steady state effort ride, which trainers are really good for that. It's harder to do outdoors unless you have something flat, but it is possible outdoors. I live in the mountains of Virginia and I'm able to do it. This is going to really up your game. So variability index, it's a metric that's included in Training Peaks. I coach on the platform Training Peaks. It's with every single workout. And I look at that variability index with my athletes. I'll grab sections of it and say like, hey, here you had a great variability index, meaning that you were on cruise control, meaning that you were riding steady state, meaning that you were not all over the place with your watts. Make sure your zones are dialed in correctly. This is really important because how do you know zone 2 is zone 2? You have to test, right? So I was talking to a guy the other day. He was racing. We were at a race and he was, he was going to pace his race. We were talking about his pacing strategy for the 24-hour race. And I asked him when was the last time he tested. And he said 4 years ago. And I said, well, how do you know that your zone 1 and zone 2 actually match the zone 2 and zone 1 that's in your mind? And he didn't have an answer. So you have to test. And through the foundation period, you really do have to test every month to make sure A, that your plan is working, but B, to really dial in those zones, because that's the magic. Once you attach those zones to specific physiology in the human body, that's where the magic happens. That's where the progress happens. That's where development absolutely happens. Route selection is key, and sometimes this is really boring. You know, for me, again, I live in the mountains of Virginia. There is basically 1 8-mile out and back. So it's 16 miles out and back that I can do for a zone 2 ride. Everything else, I just have these massive rollers to do. Okay. And so for me, when I want to go out and crush a great zone 2 ride, I just suck it up and I execute. So route selection is key. Push on the descents, and you might have to speed up your cadence. This is really important because, you know, when you face a roller, you know, and say your goal is 200 watts, what people will often do is like do 300 watts up the roller and 0 down the other side. Well, when you do that 300 watts, you're pushing your body towards another fuel source, which is carbs. And so we want to stay in that fatty acid oxidation mode. We want to burn fats as much as possible. And so what you do is you go 200 watts up, 200 watts over, and speed up, pedal on the descent, go down at 200 watts. Okay. All right. What else do we got here? Endurance up the climbs. You know, that's a really big one. We just talked about that, you know, when you're going up a climb, make sure that you're able to, you know, stick in that 200. Cyclists, especially when they come new to me, they want to just crush every climb. No, just learn to settle in, go up that climb, relax, take it easy. Push into the brakes if you're spun out on descents, right? So for where I live, like that could be a big one, right? Where the roller is, you know, I'm going down too far the other side of the roller, going too fast, I mean. And so what I'll do is I have rim brake bikes and disc brake bikes. And so I love to train on rim brake bikes because it's cheap, right? I just ride those brakes all day. And so I actually will use my brakes if I'm spun out on some descent so that I can keep that power on and stay in zone 2. Make sure you have the right gearing. This is really important. So, for me, I was spinning out on the descents too much with a 52 on the front. So last year I went to a 53 on the front, and it didn't hurt my ability to climb or kill me on the climbs or anything like that. But it did enable me to stay on the watts on my descents so that I could, you know, not be wasting time out there. If you have 2 hours out there, you don't want, you know, an hour and 15 minutes of ride time and then 45 minutes of not ride time. You want to keep pedaling, and that's really important. You know, nail your shifting, so that's really important. It's a great coordination skill to learn how to ride steady state, and that you have to pre-think about your shifting. So that's really important because in racing or, you know, most events, you really want to pre-shift. You want to go into a climb shifted correctly. You want to go around that corner shifted correctly. So this is a great training experience to make sure that you're nailing your shifting. Never stop pedaling. That's a big one. Just never stop pedaling in zone 2 workouts in training. Now, you know, obviously if you're in a race, you're in a crit, there's going to be a lot of not pedaling, but to just stay in that steady state mode, just to stay in that fat burning mode, the results are incredible, and you will be your best use. So just keep pedaling up the hill, pedaling down the hill, never stop pedaling. Talk test. Now this is really important. So, you know, there's a lot of different physiological ways that we can know if we're actually in zone 2. I love the breath test. Okay. So when I do zone 2 work, zone 1 work, if I'm doing that, like on an active recovery day, or zone 2 work, what I tell my athletes and what I do myself is just nasal breathing only. Do not breathe in and out of your mouth. If you are a mouth breather, the winter is a great time to put a bandana over your mouth or something over your mouth so that you learn to breathe through your nose. I have a lot of videos on breathing. Go ahead and check those out. If you're doing zone 2 and you're unable to breathe in and out your nose, or you're gasping for air, guess what? You're not in zone 2. There's another great way. I can't remember the guy's name who developed this, but he was all about the talk test, right? And so how he could tell zones were by what sentences that you could recite. So if you could recite this sentence, you're in zone 2. If you could, recite this sentence, you could only get so far in this sentence, then you were in zone 3. So one common way to do this is you're out on the bike and you want to know what zone you're in. Take a deep breath and say your ABCs out loud. And if you can barely get to Z, then that's a great indicator that you are riding zone 2 correctly. So the talk test is really important. Nasal breathing is really important. Now, erg mode on Zwift, I have all my athletes just turn that off, because staying in zone 2 is a volitional choice. It's a matter of decision making. It's a matter of execution. If you're just sitting in erg mode on your Zwift trainer, it takes away that thought process. It takes away your ability to develop into a habit, knowing where you are, what gear you're in, and those are the skills that you need to know for your outdoor events. So I always have my athletes turn off erg mode and just change gears, and really help them to think about zone 2. Because remember, execution, execution, execution. And then lastly, before we hang up this Zoom today, avoid group rides, right? So in that base period, it is super hard to do a zone 2 group ride. So what are you going to have? You're going to have guys go off the front, even if you sit on the back, then there's going to be a lot of stopping time, and it just does not work well for a great zone 2 effort. So if you can get out there and get great, clean zone 2 efforts when you're actually riding your zone 2 watts that through testing, and you can do that in a steady state over time, 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, breathing through your nose the entire time, you are going to rock it out. You are really going to develop your time. Because remember, we're spending 75% of our time in zone 2. So the better you can execute that, the better you're going to do come out this spring, the better you're going to do in your events. Hey, Coach Lee here. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out and ask. Would love to talk to you about zone 2 and how you can make your best season this next season.